Drag her out before the board gets here. The order cracked through the marble lobby so loudly that conversations stopped mid-sentence and coffee cups froze halfway to people's mouths. Richard Coleman stood near the security desk with his jaw tight and one hand pointed directly at the black woman standing beneath the towering silver logo of Whitaker Global Holdings. She didn't look angry. She didn't even look surprised. Naomi Whitaker simply stood there in a plain black coat, dark jeans, and low heels, holding a leather tablet case against her side, while two corporate guards moved toward her like they had rehearsed this moment before. The lobby itself looked like every billion-dollar headquarters in America: polished stone floors, floor-to-ceiling glass, giant digital displays scrolling stock prices in glowing blue light, but suddenly the entire building felt colder. "Ma'am, you need to leave immediately," one guard said firmly. Naomi looked at him calmly. "Or what?" she asked quietly. Richard stepped forward before the guard could answer. "Or you'll be escorted out," he snapped. "This floor is restricted to executive personnel." A few employees standing near the elevators glanced over, then quickly looked away again the way people do when they know something wrong is happening but don't want to be pulled into it. Naomi's eyes drifted upward toward the massive company logo hanging above the reception desk. Whitaker Global Holdings. Her company, her name, and still nobody recognized her. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Now, back to Naomi Whitaker. "I already told your receptionist who I am," Naomi said evenly. Her voice never rose. That almost made it worse. Richard let out a short laugh that carried across the lobby. "Yeah. And I'm supposed to believe the billionaire founder of this company just walked in here dressed like that?" A few nervous chuckles came from nearby employees. Naomi turned slowly toward the young receptionist behind the desk. Her name tag read Grace Miller. The young woman looked pale. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard like she wanted to say something but was afraid to. Richard noticed immediately. "Grace," he warned sharply without even looking at her, "don't." The room tightened. Naomi saw it all instantly: the fear in Grace's face, the smug confidence in Richard's posture, the way certain employees suddenly became fascinated with their phones instead of the humiliation unfolding 10 feet away from them. She had seen this before. Different building, different city, same look in people's eyes. 20 years earlier, at 22 years old, Naomi had walked into a Chicago finance firm for a job interview, wearing the only blazer she could afford. The woman at the front desk had mistaken her for maintenance staff and handed her a trash bag before asking her to clean a conference room. Naomi remembered standing there holding that bag while executives walked past pretending not to notice. That memory never left her. And now here she was again. Only this time the building belonged to her. Richard crossed his arms. "Last warning," he said coldly. "You don't belong here." Naomi finally looked him directly in the eye. Her expression didn't change. But something about the silence that followed made the entire lobby feel charged, like the air itself knew a storm was coming. Naomi Whitaker did not move. The lobby lights reflected softly against the glass walls around her, while the giant digital clock near the elevators clicked to 8:42 in the morning. Employees kept pouring into headquarters carrying laptops, iced coffees, and security badges clipped neatly against tailored jackets. But the energy inside the building had changed. People were no longer pretending not to watch. They were slowing down, listening, waiting. Richard Coleman straightened the cuffs of his navy suit like he was preparing for a meeting instead of publicly humiliating someone in the middle of the company lobby. "You are disrupting operations," he announced loudly enough for the entire floor to hear. "If you do not leave voluntarily, security will remove you from the premises." Naomi looked past him toward the reception desk again. Grace Miller sat, frozen behind her monitor. Her screen still displayed Naomi's profile in bright gold letters. Founder, majority owner, chief executive officer, highest clearance level in the company. Grace swallowed hard. "Sir," she whispered carefully. Richard turned sharply. "What?" Grace hesitated. Naomi could almost see the war happening behind the young woman's eyes. Fear versus truth. Career versus conscience. "Nothing," Grace said quietly, lowering her gaze. Richard nodded once, satisfied. Then he faced Naomi again with the confidence of a man who believed power belonged only to people who looked like him. People like you always think confidence can replace credentials, he said coldly. But this building does not run on attitude. Naomi tilted her head slightly. No, she replied calmly. It runs on leadership. A few employees nearby exchanged nervous looks. Someone standing beside the espresso station muttered, "Who is she?" Another whispered back, "No idea, but Richard is pushing this way too far." Naomi heard every word. She always did. Silence had taught her that. Years ago, when she was still building Whitaker Global out of a cramped apartment in Detroit, investors would smile in meetings while speaking over her like she was invisible. She learned then that people revealed themselves most clearly when they believed you had no power. And Richard Coleman was revealing everything. One of the guards stepped closer. "Ma'am, please come with us." Naomi's eyes shifted toward him. He looked uncomfortable now, younger than the other guard, probably early 30s, probably wondering why a woman standing this calm was being treated like a criminal. Richard noticed the hesitation immediately. "Do your job," he snapped. The lobby tightened again. Nearby elevator doors opened with a soft chime, and three executives stepped out mid-conversation before stopping cold at the sight unfolding in front of them. One of them, Claire Benson, Senior Vice President of Operations, folded her arms as she approached. Blonde hair perfectly styled, white suit tailored within an inch of perfection. Her heels echoed sharply against the marble floor. "What is going on here?" she asked. Richard answered instantly. "Unauthorized individual refusing removal." Claire looked Naomi up and down slowly, the way people inspect something they have already decided has no value. "This is exactly why we tightened visitor access after the protests downtown," she said dismissively. "You cannot just let random people wander into executive spaces anymore." Naomi's expression never changed, but Grace looked physically ill behind the desk now. Claire glanced toward the guards. "Why is she still standing here?" she asked. The younger guard hesitated again. "She says she belongs here." Claire laughed softly under her breath. "People like her always do." The words landed heavily across the lobby. Not loud, not shouted. Worse, casual. Like discrimination had become routine enough to sound normal. Naomi slowly turned toward Claire. Her voice remained low and controlled. "That sentence is going to cost this company more than you realize." Claire smirked. "Sweetheart, you are not in a position to threaten anybody here." But Naomi was no longer looking at her. She was staring at the security cameras mounted high above the lobby entrance, black lenses silently recording every second of what was happening. And for the first time that morning, a faint smile touched her face. The smile on Naomi Whitaker's face lasted only a second, but it changed the atmosphere inside the lobby completely. It was not the smile of someone embarrassed or defeated. It was the kind of smile people gave when they finally saw the full shape of a mistake unfolding in front of them. Richard Coleman noticed it too. His confidence tightened instantly. "What is so funny?" he demanded. Naomi lowered her eyes from the security cameras back to him. "Nothing," she said softly. "I was just wondering how many witnesses you planned on collecting before this gets expensive." The words settled into the room like smoke. Claire Benson rolled her eyes dramatically. "Oh, please," she muttered. Now she is threatening lawsuits. Naomi looked directly at her. "No," she replied calmly. "I am talking about consequences." Near the reception desk, Grace Miller's hands trembled against the keyboard. The employee chat system on. Her monitor had already started exploding with private messages from workers across headquarters asking what was happening downstairs. Someone from accounting had apparently seen the confrontation on a security feed. Another employee claimed the executive board was arriving in less than 20 minutes for the quarterly leadership meeting. Grace looked back at Naomi's profile on the screen again. Founder, majority owner, chief executive officer. The highest authority in the company was standing 10 feet away, while middle management treated her like an intruder. Grace felt sick. "Richard," she whispered carefully again. "I really think you should check the—" "Enough," Richard snapped. His voice cut through the lobby so sharply that several employees visibly jumped. "You are here to process visitors, not give opinions." Grace went silent immediately. Naomi watched the exchange without blinking. She had spent decades studying rooms like this. Rooms where fear traveled faster than truth. One of the giant digital screens mounted above the elevators suddenly shifted to the morning market report, flooding the lobby with blue light. Whitaker Global stock had opened up nearly 6% that morning. Billions of dollars moving in real time, while the woman responsible for building the company stood accused of not belonging there. The irony almost felt theatrical. Claire crossed her arms tighter. "Call downtown security," she told Richard quietly. "This has gone on long enough." Richard nodded once and reached for the radio clipped to his belt. "Corporate response team to main lobby," he said firmly. "We need immediate removal assistance." Several employees exchanged alarmed looks. The corporate response team was usually reserved for violent incidents or major security threats. Naomi had not raised her voice once. She had not threatened anyone. She had barely moved. And still they escalated. A young black intern standing near the elevators finally spoke up. His badge read, Evan Brooks. "She is literally just standing there," he said carefully. Richard turned toward him immediately. "And you are literally one sentence away from unemployment," he replied coldly. The lobby fell silent again. Evan looked down at the floor. Naomi's eyes lingered on him for a moment. She recognized that look too. The calculation young employees made when they realized morality could cost them their future. 27 years earlier, Naomi had watched her own father lose a management job at a manufacturing plant after speaking up against discriminatory hiring practices. He came home carrying a cardboard box filled with family photos and coffee mugs while pretending everything was fine. Naomi still remembered hearing her mother crying behind the kitchen door later that night. Silence protects systems. That lesson stayed with her forever. The sound of approaching footsteps echoed from the hallway near the executive parking elevators. 4 additional corporate guards appeared wearing dark gray jackets with silver security insignias stitched across the chest. The entire lobby visibly shifted as employees stepped farther back to make room. Richard's posture straightened immediately. Power had arrived, or at least he thought it had. "There she is," Richard said, pointing toward Naomi like he was identifying a criminal suspect. "Escort her out." The lead guard looked at Naomi carefully. Something in his expression flickered uncertainty, maybe recognition, maybe instinct. Naomi met his eyes calmly. "You should think very carefully about what happens next," she said quietly. But Richard answered before the guard could speak. "No," he snapped. "She should have thought about that before walking into a building where she does not belong." The 4 additional corporate guards stopped a few feet from Naomi Whitaker, forming a quiet wall of authority between her and the rest of the lobby. Employees backed away instinctively. The air no longer felt normal inside headquarters. It felt pressurized, like one wrong sentence could crack the entire building open. The lead guard, Marcus Hale, studied Naomi carefully. Mid-40s, former military posture, calm eyes. Unlike Richard Coleman, he was not smiling. "Ma'am," Marcus said carefully, "I need you to come with us." Naomi held his gaze. "Do you know who I am?" she asked quietly. Before Marcus could answer, Richard cut in. Immediately. "She is a trespasser refusing compliance." Naomi almost smiled again at the speed of it. Richard was terrified of silence now. Silence gave people time to think. And thinking was dangerous. Near the elevators, more employees had stopped walking entirely. Phones were appearing discreetly at chest level. Someone near the back whispered, "This is going to end badly." Another voice answered softly, "I think it already has." Claire Benson stepped beside Richard, her expression sharp with irritation. "Why are we still entertaining this?" she demanded. "Remove her already." Marcus Hale did not move. Something about Naomi's composure unsettled him. Most people confronted by security either panicked or argued. Naomi didn't either. She stood there like someone watching a test unfold exactly as expected. Behind the reception desk, Grace Miller could barely breathe. Naomi's executive profile still glowed on her screen like a warning sign nobody wanted to read. Founder, Chief Executive Officer, Owner. Grace's fingers tightened around the edge of the desk. She looked from Naomi to Richard and back again. Then she made a decision. "Stop." Her voice came out shaky but loud enough to cut through the lobby. Every head turned toward her instantly. Richard's face darkened. "Excuse me." Grace swallowed hard. "Her name is in the system," she said carefully. "Not as a visitor. She has executive authorization." Richard stepped toward the desk, so fast the movement startled nearby employees. "Grace," he warned, his voice low and dangerous, "you do not know what you are talking about." But Grace did not look away this time. Fear still sat in her eyes, but something stronger had finally pushed past it. "Yes, I do," she said quietly. "I checked twice." The room shifted immediately. Employees started whispering openly now. Claire's expression tightened. What exactly are you saying? She asked sharply. Grace looked at Naomi again before answering. I am saying she has founder-level access. Silence hit the lobby hard. Even the digital market ticker above the elevators seemed too loud suddenly. Richard laughed once, but the sound came out strained. Founder-level access, he repeated mockingly. You think this woman founded Whitaker Global? Grace hesitated only a second. That is what the system says. Claire folded her arms tighter. Then the system is compromised. Naomi finally spoke again. Interesting, she said softly. The system is only wrong when it recognizes someone you do not respect. Claire's jaw tightened immediately. Richard turned back toward Marcus Hale. Do not stand there listening to this nonsense, he snapped. Escort her out now. But Marcus still had not moved. He looked toward Grace. You are absolutely certain? He asked carefully. Grace nodded once. Highest clearance level in the company. The younger guard standing beside Marcus shifted uncomfortably. Employees near the elevators were openly recording now. One man from accounting whispered, "Oh my God." Another employee murmured, "Richard just destroyed his career." Naomi watched the entire room transform in real time. The same people who had avoided eye contact minutes earlier were suddenly staring directly at her. Not because their morality changed overnight. Because power had become visible. That was the part Naomi hated most. Respect always arrived late. Richard sensed the shift immediately. Panic flickered behind his confidence for the first time all morning. This is ridiculous, he barked loudly. Anybody can manipulate employee records. Naomi tilted her head slightly. Richard, she said calmly, you have spent the last 15 minutes trying to remove the woman whose name is on the front of the building. And for the first time since the confrontation began, nobody in the lobby laughed. The silence after Naomi Whitaker's words felt heavier than the entire lobby itself. Employees stood frozen beside marble columns and glowing elevator panels while the reality of what had just happened slowly spread through the building like a crack racing across glass. Richard Coleman's face tightened so hard it almost looked painful. No, he said quickly, shaking his head once. No, this is some kind of setup. Naomi did not answer immediately. She simply watched him. Calm, steady, patient. That patience made him unravel faster. Claire Benson stepped closer to the reception desk and leaned toward Grace Miller's monitor. The color drained from her face almost instantly. There it was in bright gold lettering across the screen. Naomi Whitaker, founder and chief executive officer, majority shareholder, active executive clearance, permanent access authorization. Claire straightened too quickly. This cannot be right, she muttered. Grace looked at her carefully. It is right, she whispered back. Nearby employees heard it. Murmurs spread across the lobby immediately. Oh my God, that is really her. Richard is finished. One employee from legal quietly stepped backward toward the elevators like he wanted to disappear before anyone noticed he had witnessed any of this. But Richard refused to let go of control. People like him never did. Everybody calm down, he barked loudly. We still need identity verification. Naomi almost looked disappointed hearing that. Not angry. Tired. Like she had heard the same excuse her entire life. She opened her leather tablet case slowly and removed a slim black phone. The motion alone caused the entire room to tighten again. Richard pointed immediately. Do not let her access anything, he ordered the guards. Marcus Hale frowned. Sir, I think we need to pause this situation. I did not ask what you think, Richard snapped back. I gave an order. Naomi glanced toward Marcus. You still have time to make the right decision, she said quietly. Marcus looked away first. Across the lobby, Evan Brooks stood near the elevators watching everything unfold with wide eyes. Naomi reminded him of his mother somehow. The same quiet strength. The same refusal to shrink herself just because someone demanded it. He finally spoke again, this time louder. You all owe her an apology. Claire spun toward him immediately. Stay in your lane, in turn. Evan swallowed hard, but did not move. No, he replied softly. This is everybody's lane. The sentence landed harder than he expected. Employees nearby exchanged glances again. The mood inside headquarters was changing now. Fear was no longer sitting only on one side of the room. Naomi looked around the lobby slowly, taking in every face. Some ashamed, some nervous, some still defensive. She had built this company from nothing, but now she could see the culture rotting underneath the polished floors and billion-dollar branding. The disrespect was too familiar. At 16 years old, Naomi had once followed her mother through the back entrance of a downtown hotel where she cleaned rooms during night shifts. Naomi still remembered the manager stopping them in the hallway asking if they were lost because guests used the front entrance. Her mother had lowered her eyes and apologized even though she worked there. Naomi never forgot that moment. Not the humiliation. Not the silence afterward in the car ride home. She promised herself then that if she ever built something powerful, nobody under her roof would be treated that way again. And now here she stood inside a company carrying her own name, while executives repeated the same poison with better suits and cleaner language. Naomi unlocked her phone calmly. Richard stepped forward again, panic breaking through his voice now. "Take the phone." Marcus Hale finally shook his head. "No." The single word hit the lobby like a dropped glass. Richard stared at him in disbelief. "Excuse me." Marcus stood straighter this time. This situation should never have escalated this far. Claire looked horrified. "Are you serious right now?" But Marcus kept his eyes on Naomi. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "if you really are Naomi Whitaker, then headquarters leadership needs to be notified immediately." Naomi looked directly at him. "Leadership already knows," she replied softly. Then she pressed one button on her phone, and somewhere deep inside the building, executive security protocols quietly came alive. At first, nothing happened. The lobby remained frozen in that strange silence where nobody knew whether the situation was ending or about to explode into something far worse. Naomi Whitaker lowered her phone slowly, while Richard Coleman stared at her with the forced confidence of a man trying to outrun panic. Then the building changed. A soft electronic tone echoed through headquarters. One quiet chime, then another. Employees looked upward instinctively as the massive digital displays above the elevators flickered black for half a second before new text appeared across every screen in the lobby. Executive security protocol activated. Authorization verified. The air inside the building seemed to disappear all at once. Claire Benson stepped backward. "What did she do?" she whispered. Naomi answered calmly. "I protected my company." Richard immediately grabbed his radio again. "Override the system," he barked. "Now." Static answered him. Then a mechanical voice came through the speaker. "Access denied." The color drained from Richard's face. Around the lobby, security badges suddenly began flashing red one by one. Employees pulled them from their jackets in confusion. Elevator panels locked. Glass security doors sealed with soft metallic clicks. Somewhere deeper in headquarters, alarms began chiming quietly across executive floors. Not emergency alarms. Executive containment protocols. Naomi stood motionless in the center of it all while the billion-dollar headquarters slowly bent to her authority. "This is impossible," Claire muttered under her breath. Naomi looked toward her. "No," she said softly. "This is ownership." Phones started ringing throughout the lobby now. Executives answering calls. Managers whispering frantically into headsets. One employee from finance stared at his screen and whispered, "The board meeting just got suspended." Another employee near reception said, "Every executive floor is locked down." Richard turned toward Marcus Hale furiously. "Do something." Marcus looked at him carefully. "I think the company already did." That answer landed like a slap across Richard's remaining authority. He looked around desperately for support, but nobody stepped forward anymore. Not Claire. Not the guards. Not even the employees who had laughed earlier. The room had shifted completely. Naomi's phone vibrated once in her hand. She answered calmly. "Monica." Her executive assistant's voice came through sharp and composed. "Blackline protocol is fully active. Executive access frozen. Legal and board oversight teams are reviewing live security feeds now." Naomi glanced toward the cameras mounted across the lobby. Every second of the confrontation had been captured from multiple angles. Richard followed her gaze and finally understood the scale of what was happening. Not just embarrassment. Documentation. Evidence. "Monica," Naomi continued quietly, "has the board been informed why the protocol was triggered?" "Yes," Monica replied immediately. "Discriminatory escalation by executive security leadership. Public humiliation of the chief executive officer. Failure to verify executive credentials. Witnesses confirmed." The words echoed through the silence surrounding Naomi. Richard looked physically smaller now somehow, like the building itself had begun rejecting him. Claire folded her arms tightly across her chest, but her confidence was gone. "This is insane," she muttered weakly. Naomi's eyes moved toward her. "No," she replied. "What is insane is how comfortable this company became humiliating people it decided did not belong." Near the elevators, Evan Brooks stood perfectly still listening to every word. So did dozens of employees around him. Some looked ashamed. Others looked angry. A few looked afraid for the first time all morning. Grace Miller quietly wiped tears from her eyes behind the reception desk. Naomi noticed. "Grace," she said gently. The young receptionist looked up immediately. "Thank you for telling the truth when it became difficult." Grace nodded once, unable to speak. Richard suddenly stepped forward again, desperation breaking through completely now. "You set us up," he snapped loudly. Naomi looked at him without blinking. "No," she answered calmly. "I gave you the opportunity to show me who you are." Somewhere upstairs, another layer of executive locks engaged throughout the building. Soft metallic clicks echoed faintly through the structure like dominoes falling one after another. Headquarters was shutting down floor by floor, and every person in the lobby understood exactly who was responsible. The headquarters lobby no longer sounded like a place of business. It sounded like a system collapsing in real time. Phones rang endlessly. Security radios crackled with confused voices asking why executive access had disappeared across multiple floors. Employees stood, clustered near the elevators, whispering in disbelief, while the giant digital screens overhead continued flashing the same cold message. Executive security protocol active. All non-essential operations suspended. Richard Coleman stared at the words like they were written in another language. "Turn it off," he snapped toward nobody and everybody at the same time. "Turn it off right now." But nobody moved. Nobody even answered him anymore. That was the moment Richard finally understood what power really looked like. It was not yelling. It was not intimidation. It was not standing in an expensive suit barking orders at people who feared losing their jobs. Real power looked like Naomi Whitaker standing perfectly still while an entire billion-dollar headquarters obeyed her voice from hundreds of floors and offices away. Claire Benson looked toward Naomi again, but this time the arrogance was gone. "You shut down the entire building?" she asked quietly. Naomi met her eyes calmly. "No," she answered. "I shut down access to people who should never have been trusted with authority." The sentence landed hard across the lobby. Even the guards standing beside Marcus Hale lowered their eyes slightly. Naomi's phone vibrated again. Monica Hayes returned to the line immediately. "Board members are joining the emergency review conference now," she reported. "Legal wants confirmation before initiating executive suspensions." Naomi looked around the lobby one more time. At Grace, standing behind the reception desk with tears still in her eyes. At Evan Brooks near the elevators refusing to look away. At the employees who had watched silently while she was treated like she did not belong inside the company she built from scratch. "You have confirmation," Naomi said quietly. Richard stepped forward suddenly, panic sharpening every word now. "You cannot do this over a misunderstanding." Naomi turned toward him slowly. "A misunderstanding," she repeated softly. "You called security on me. You threatened employees for telling the truth. You tried to remove me from my own headquarters because I did not match your idea of what power should look like." Richard opened his mouth again, but no. Words came out this time. Because she was right. And everybody in the lobby knew it. Claire folded her arms tighter. "Nobody knew who you were," she muttered weakly. Naomi's expression hardened for the first time all morning. Not loud. Not explosive. Worse. Controlled disappointment. "That is the problem," she said quietly. "You treated someone you thought was powerless with disrespect. You only changed when you realized I owned the building." Silence swallowed the lobby whole. Naomi took one slow step forward. Her heels echoed sharply against the marble floor. "You did not fail because you failed to recognize me," she continued. "You failed because this company became comfortable humiliating people before verifying the truth." Near the elevators, one employee quietly lowered his head. Another slipped his company badge into his pocket like he suddenly felt ashamed wearing it. Naomi's voice remained calm, but every word cut clean through the room. "I spent 27 years building Whitaker Global because I believed dignity should exist in every room under my name. Yet this morning I walked into my own headquarters and watched executives weaponize appearance, assumption, and fear before basic respect." Claire looked away completely now. Richard's breathing had become uneven. The lobby cameras above them continued recording silently. Permanent witnesses. Naomi lifted the phone back to her ear. Monica. Yes, ma'am. Initiate executive disciplinary review immediately. Richard Coleman. Claire Benson. Full investigation into security escalation procedures and discrimination complaints. Richard looked stunned. Wait. Naomi did not even look at him. Freeze all executive privileges pending review. Monica answered without hesitation. Already processing. A sharp electronic tone suddenly echoed across the lobby again. Richard instinctively looked down at the security badge clipped to his jacket just as the light turned from green to solid red. Claire's badge followed a second later. Then another tone. Executive network access revoked. Several employees gasped quietly. Richard grabbed the badge in disbelief like he could force it back to life through sheer denial. Naomi finally looked directly at him one last time. You tried to drag the owner out of her own headquarters, she said calmly. Now you get to watch what accountability looks like. Richard Coleman stared down at the dead security badge in his hand like it had personally betrayed him. The tiny red light blinking against the plastic looked almost harmless, but everybody in the lobby understood what it meant. His authority was gone. Not reduced. Not suspended quietly behind closed doors. Gone publicly in front of employees, guards, executives, and security cameras still recording every second. Claire Benson checked her own badge again, even though she already knew the result. Red. Access denied. Her company phone suddenly buzzed with incoming alerts one after another. Executive credentials revoked. Network access suspended. Mandatory legal review initiated. She swallowed hard. Naomi, she said carefully, her voice softer now. We can resolve this privately. Naomi Whitaker looked at her without emotion. You were comfortable humiliating me publicly, she replied calmly. Why should accountability happen privately? The question landed hard across the room. Nobody answered it. Nearby employees shifted uncomfortably while whispering spread through the lobby like electricity. She is right. They would have dragged anybody else out. This has probably happened before. Marcus Hale slowly unclipped his own security radio and handed it to one of the other guards beside him. I am stepping out of operational command, he announced quietly, until legal review is complete. Naomi nodded once toward him. Not approval. Recognition. He had chosen integrity before the collapse became total. Richard noticed the gesture immediately and looked furious. You are all turning on me now, he snapped. After I protected this building for 12 years. Naomi answered before anyone else could speak. No, Richard, she said softly. You protected power. There is a difference. The lobby went silent again. Every sentence she spoke seemed to peel another layer off the illusion that had been holding the company together. Near the elevators, Evan Brooks glanced around at the executives, standing speechless beside marble walls and glowing stock tickers. For the first time since starting his internship, the building did not feel untouchable anymore. It felt exposed. Grace Miller finally stood from behind the reception desk and walked slowly toward Naomi. Her hand still trembled slightly. I am sorry, she whispered. I should have spoken sooner. Naomi looked at her gently. Fear survives when people think they are alone, she said. You spoke when it mattered. Grace nodded quietly, tears filling her eyes again. Across the lobby, Claire suddenly looked toward the employees gathering nearby. More phones were visible now. More recording. The story was already escaping the building. This cannot get outside, Claire muttered under her breath. Naomi heard her anyway. Why? She asked calmly. Because people might see how this company treats people before titles become visible? Claire looked away immediately. Richard's breathing grew heavier as the reality finally closed around him completely. This was never about race, he insisted loudly. This was protocol. Naomi took one slow step closer. Protocol did not call me people like her, she replied quietly. Protocol did not threaten employees for telling the truth. Protocol did not decide a black woman standing calmly in her own headquarters looked suspicious simply because she did not arrive wearing luxury labels and surrounded by assistants. Richard tried to interrupt, but Naomi continued without raising her voice once. You saw confidence without permission, ownership without your approval, and you responded the only way systems like this often do. You tried to remove it. The words cut through the lobby with surgical precision. Employees lowered their eyes. Some looked ashamed. Others looked angry for an entirely different reason, now angry because they realized this culture had existed around them for years while nobody challenged it. Naomi's phone buzzed once more. Monica Hayes again. The board has completed preliminary review, she said sharply. They are authorizing immediate executive termination pending final investigation. Richard went pale instantly. Claire closed her eyes. Briefly, Naomi looked around the headquarters lobby one final time. The same lobby where less than an hour earlier people had watched her treated like an intruder. Now the entire building stood still around her, waiting for her next decision. Monica, Naomi said calmly into the phone, proceed. Another electronic tone echoed overhead. Then the giant digital screens changed again. Executive terminations in process. Security access revoked. Corporate ethics review active. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. The headquarters had already chosen a side. And for the first time that morning, justice stood at the center of the room instead of humiliation. The headquarters lobby remained completely still after the termination notice appeared across the giant digital screens. Nobody rushed for the elevators anymore. Nobody pretended to check emails or avoid eye contact. The entire building seemed to be holding its breath around Naomi Whitaker. Richard Coleman stood near the security desk with his deactivated badge hanging uselessly from his hand, while Claire Benson stared silently at the floor she once crossed with absolute confidence every morning. The power inside the room had shifted so completely it almost felt physical. Naomi looked around slowly at the employees gathered across the marble lobby. Analysts, assistants, interns, security staff, reception workers, people who had spent years learning which voices mattered and which people were expected to stay quiet. Look around you, Naomi said calmly. Her voice was not loud, but every word carried through the building with perfect clarity. This is what happens when fear becomes part of company culture. Nobody interrupted her. Nobody dared. Even the security guards stood motionless beside the sealed glass entry doors. Naomi continued slowly. This morning was not the first time someone walked into this building and got judged before they were heard. It was simply the first time the person being judged owned the company. Several employees lowered their eyes immediately. Grace Miller covered her mouth with one trembling hand. Evan Brooks stood near the elevators listening like he never wanted to forget a single word. Naomi looked toward the reception desk where the confrontation had started less than an hour earlier. There are people who work hard every day and still walk into rooms wondering whether they belong there, she said quietly. Not because they lack intelligence, not because they lack talent, because somebody decided dignity should be conditional. Richard finally looked up again. His voice sounded smaller now. I was doing my job. Naomi turned toward him one last time. No, she replied calmly. You were protecting your assumptions. The silence that followed hit harder than shouting ever could. Somewhere above them, executive floors remained locked behind frozen security systems. The entire headquarters still paused under blackline protocol, while legal teams reviewed every second of recorded footage. Naomi could feel the building itself changing around her. Not fixed, not healed, but exposed. And exposure was where accountability began. Monica Hayes returned to the phone line once more. Board leadership has completed emergency review, she reported. They are requesting your final directive before restoring operations. Naomi glanced upward toward the towering company logo suspended above the lobby entrance. Whitaker Global Holdings. Her mother used to clean office buildings at night, so Naomi could study during the day. Her father once lost a management position after speaking against discrimination nobody wanted acknowledged publicly. Every sacrifice, every humiliation, every closed door had led to this moment standing beneath her own name while deciding what kind of company it would truly become. Naomi took a slow breath. Restore operations, she said calmly. But effective immediately, mandatory executive ethics reviews begin company-wide. Independent reporting channels will be established for all discrimination complaints. Security Escalation Authority is suspended pending investigation. Monica answered immediately. Understood. Another soft electronic tone echoed across headquarters. The digital warning screens faded. Elevator systems slowly restarted. Glass doors unlocked with quiet metallic clicks. The building was waking back up, but it did not feel like the same building anymore. Employees looked at Naomi differently now, not just because she was the billionaire founder, because she had stood in the center of humiliation without losing composure, without screaming, without begging. She had let truth expose the system all by itself. Naomi picked up her leather tablet case from the reception counter and prepared to leave the lobby. Grace stepped forward carefully. "Ms. Whitaker?" Naomi turned. Grace's eyes filled again. "Thank you," she whispered softly. Naomi gave her a small nod. "Do not thank me for correcting what should never have happened," she replied. Then she looked around the headquarters one final time before walking toward the elevators. "I did not raise my voice today," she said calmly. "I raised the standard." And as the elevator doors closed behind her, nobody in that lobby would ever forget the morning a quiet black woman walked into her own headquarters and forced an entire corporation to confront the difference between power and dignity.